Welcome to Women That Kill, where we use murder cases to help people better understand history. Because behind every crime, there is a world, and understanding that world changes how we see everything. Today's case comes from South Africa, and it begins with a statistic that might surprise you. Although familicide, the killing of one's own family members, is relatively rare, it is actually the most common form of mass killing. Between 1900 and 2000, there were 909 victims of mass murder in the United States alone. Of those, more than half occurred within an immediate family. The people most likely to kill you are not strangers. They are the people who sit across from you at dinner. Today, we look at a woman who understood that better than most, because she was the one doing the killing. Her name was Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu. She was a South African police sergeant. She used her job, her connections, and her knowledge of the criminal underworld to systematically murder 5 members of her own family and a boyfriend. Collecting on insurance policies she had secretly taken out on each of them. And she was 3 days away from burning her sister and 5 young children alive when a hitman walked into a police station and changed everything. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu was born in 1975 in South Africa, in a rural area called Bushbuckridge, a region in Mpumalanga province marked by deep, persistent poverty and limited economic opportunity. She had a daughter with a boyfriend and eventually made the decision that many young people from rural South Africa make out of necessity. She left home and moved to Johannesburg to find work. The reason she left matters. No one in her family had a job. Not her sisters, not her mother, not her nephews. The entire family lived in poverty, dependent on whatever could be scraped together from subsistence, living in a rural community where formal employment was scarce and economic mobility was almost non-existent. In 2014, that changed. Rosemary became a police sergeant, the only employed person in her entire family. It was a moment of genuine pride. Her family was thrilled. A steady salary, a uniform, a position of authority. After years of struggle, something had finally gone right. The problem was the math. The average salary for a police officer in South Africa is approximately $1,100 a month. That was barely enough to support Rosemary and her daughter in Johannesburg, let alone send money back to a large rural family with no other income. The weight of being the sole financial lifeline for an entire extended family on a modest police salary is almost impossible to overstate. Rosemary felt that pressure, and rather than let anyone see it, she found another way. To truly understand Rosemary Ndlovu, you have to understand what poverty looks like in post-apartheid South Africa and what it means to be the one person in a family who makes it out. South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies on earth. The legacy of apartheid, the system of institutionalized racial segregation and economic exclusion that formally ended in 1994, did not disappear with the transition to democracy. It left behind deeply entrenched patterns of poverty, unemployment, and geographic isolation that continue to shape the lives of millions of South Africans, particularly in rural areas like Bushbuckridge. In communities like the one Rosemary grew up in, there is a powerful cultural expectation, rooted in genuine love and solidarity, but also in necessity, that family members who find employment will support those who have not. Remittances from urban workers to rural families are not just common. They are widespread. They are expected. They are a lifeline. And for the person sending the money, they are also an identity. To be the one who made it, the one who sends money home, is to hold a particular kind of status and responsibility within the family structure. When that money starts to run out, when the salary doesn't stretch far enough, when the gambling debts mount up, when the image you have built of yourself as the family's provider starts to crack, the shame can be overwhelming. In Rosemary's world, there was apparently no room to say, "I am struggling. I cannot keep doing this. I need help." There was only one alternative she chose. Rosemary's colleagues at the police station noticed that something didn't add up. On a police sergeant's salary, she was buying her colleagues lunch without asking to be repaid. She talked openly about gambling at Emperor's Palace Casino in Kempton Park, one of the largest casino complexes in Africa. She seemed comfortable, flush, unburdened by the financial strain that her salary should have created. Her coworkers were puzzled, but they liked her. She was fun to be around. She was generous. Nobody looked too closely. What they didn't know was where the money was coming from. Beginning in 2012, people in Rosemary's life started dying. Her cousin died in March 2012. Then her sister Audrey was poisoned and strangled in a rented room in June 2013. Then her boyfriend and the father of her daughter were found butchered. Then her niece was beaten so severely in the head that she could not speak. She was found alive but died of her injuries, leaving behind a husband and 3 children. Then her nephew was hacked to death and his body dumped at a marketplace. The killings were violent and public and completely unsolved. Rosemary paid for all the funerals. She was grief-stricken, devastated, a woman pursued by tragedy. She repeatedly pushed the police to investigate her family's deaths. She was the bereaved one, the dedicated one, the one holding it all together. She was also the beneficiary of every single insurance policy. Each victim, her sister, her boyfriend, her niece, her nephews, had a life insurance policy with Rosemary Ndlovu listed as the beneficiary. By the time investigators pieced it together, Rosemary had collected nearly $100,000 from the deaths of her relatives. That is equivalent to approximately 10 years' salary for a South African police officer. Every cent went to the casino. She had nothing left to show for it. No property, no savings, nothing of significant value. She had killed her own family members, collected the insurance money, and gambled it away. And then she had taken out new policies on the next targets. One family member did not have an insurance policy. His name was Brilliant, Rosemary's nephew, the son of her murdered sister Audrey. Brilliant had discovered something. He had found out that Rosemary had received more than $47,000 from a life insurance policy taken out in his mother's name. He knew what that meant. He was going to tell people. Brilliant was stabbed to death, and his body was dumped in a market. There was no insurance policy on Brilliant. His death did not earn Rosemary a cent. It was purely protective. The elimination of a witness who had gotten too close to the truth. He was killed not for money, but for silence. He was 20-something years old. His mother had already been murdered by the same woman. The case broke open in 2018 because of a hitman who had a conscience. A man came into a police station and reported that he had been commissioned to kill an entire family, including a 5-month-old baby. He could not go through with it. Police moved quickly. They fitted the hitman with recording equipment and set up a sting operation. He was to meet with his client to receive further instructions. The client was Rosemary. The video of that meeting is available on YouTube, and it is extraordinary in its detail and its horror. Rosemary, completely unaware she was being recorded, went into graphic detail about what she wanted done. She wanted her sister Joyce and Joyce's 5 young children killed. She wanted them burned alive in their home while they slept, or strangled. She then drove with the hitman to Joyce's house and handed him a bag of pills and gasoline. She confirmed the timeline. She discussed the method. She got out of the car and called a taxi. And she waited nearby, wanting to see her sister's house on fire before she left. While she was waiting, the police arrested her. They took her to Joyce's home. Joyce confirmed that Rosemary was her sister. And then Joyce confirmed something that made the room go quiet. Rosemary had told Joyce she was taking out a life insurance policy on Joyce's children, so that if something happened to Joyce, the children would be protected. Joyce had believed her. She had handed over her children's birth certificates. She thought she was doing something to protect them. She had actually handed Rosemary everything she needed to profit from their deaths. With Rosemary in custody, investigators went back through years of deaths and disappearances connected to her family. What they found was a pattern so clear that in retrospect, it seemed almost impossible to have missed. Rosemary had been with most of her victims in the period immediately before their deaths. She was either the last person to see them alive or the first to notice they were missing. The insurance policies were found at her home. The hitman who had killed her sister, Audrey. The one murder investigators believe Rosemary committed herself, after the first hitman refused and connected her to a second who also refused and taught her how to do it instead. Confirmed that Rosemary had known him through her work as a police officer. That detail matters. Rosemary's job had given her something that most people do not have access to: a direct window into the criminal underworld. Every day at work, she dealt with addicts, career criminals, and people who operated outside the law for money. She knew who could be hired. She knew how those conversations worked. She knew how to approach the right people and make the right offer. Her badge had made her a more effective killer. And the investigation found something else. Something that landed like a punch, even to the hardened officers working the case. Among Rosemary's possessions, investigators found insurance policies that had been purchased just before her arrest. New policies on new targets. One of those policies was on Rosemary's 80-year-old mother. Rosemary had already paid a hitman a deposit of $172 to kill her. She had driven him to her mother's home. The hitman had gone inside, asked the elderly woman for a cup of water, looked at her, old, vulnerable, completely unaware of what was happening, and left without completing the job. He felt sorry for her. Rosemary's mother remembered the man who had come for a glass of water. She refused to believe her daughter had sent him. Rosemary was charged with 6 counts of murder, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. Before the trial began, additional charges were added, because while she was in custody awaiting trial, Rosemary attempted to arrange the assassination of the chief investigating officer in her case. She hired a hitman from prison. She was transferred to a maximum security facility in another city as a result. The trial revealed details that the prosecution used to devastating effect. Witness after witness testified that there had been no animosity between Rosemary and the family members she killed. No arguments, no obvious conflict. In fact, The opposite was true. She had sent them money. She had attended their events. She had paid for their funerals with what investigators now understood was the insurance money from the previous victim. The family had loved her. They had trusted her. They had had no reason not to. The total insurance payout Rosemary received from the deaths of her relatives came to nearly $100,000. When asked what she had done with the money, she could not account for it. She had no property, no savings, nothing. The gambling had consumed everything. The judge's words at sentencing were stark and precise. She had killed all those who loved her for nothing. Throughout the trial, Rosemary maintained her innocence. Once convicted, she said she was glad it was over. And then, as she was led away after sentencing, she turned and pointed at a witness who had testified against her and told the room that, although she would be spending Christmas in prison, that person would be spending the next one with her. She was convicted and sentenced to 6 life sentences, plus an additional 20 years. Criminologists have a term for what Rosemary Ndlovu was: a family annihilator. These are individuals who kill multiple members of their own families, typically driven by financial pressure, shame, or a distorted sense that destroying the family is preferable to admitting failure to them. In Rosemary's case, the financial stressors were real and severe: a modest salary, a gambling addiction that consumed everything she earned and more, an entire extended family financially dependent on her, with cultural expectations she felt unable to challenge or escape, and an absolute inability or refusal to say out loud, "I am in trouble. I need help." Instead, she decided that the solution to her financial problems was to eliminate the people whose needs created the pressure. And because her job had given her access to people who could help her do it, she had both the means and the motive. The judge noted it precisely. She chose money over family. And in the end, the money was gone too. At the end of every episode, if I can find the killer's birthday, I take a look at their zodiac sign, because it gives us an interesting lens through which to view who they were. Rosemary Ndlovu was born in 1975 in Bushbuckridge, South Africa. Her exact birth date has not been confirmed in the publicly available record, which means we cannot determine her zodiac sign with certainty this week. So, we will not be adding a zodiac badge to our tracker today. But what we can say is this: Rosemary Ndlovu presented one face to the world: warm, generous, devoted, the grieving woman holding her family together through one tragedy after another, while quietly engineering every one of those tragedies from behind the scenes. Whatever her sign, the gap between the person she showed the world and the person she actually was is one of the most complete and sustained deceptions we have ever encountered on this show. Her mother still doesn't believe it. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more, check out my playlist. There are plenty more stories waiting for you.